Did Meghan truly confirm the one thing no one had ever dared to say out loud, that Archie and Lilibet were never actually carried in her own womb? That very question alone sent chills through royal watchers across every corner of the globe. For many long years, people everywhere have speculated, endlessly whispered in secrecy, and debated with growing intensity about the private lives of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Yet, nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared the public for the astonishing revelation that was about to come to light. In an entirely unplanned, behind-the-scenes moment, Meghan Markle let slip a comment. It seems subtle, quiet, almost unremarkable on the surface, yet it was in fact explosive, loaded with implications that could not be ignored. With that remark, she revealed a truth the royal family had laboured tirelessly to bury and conceal, the reality of surrogacy for her two beloved children. Before we continue further, make sure to press the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so that you will never miss important updates. For generations, the royal family has proven itself to be unmatched in the art of narrative control, carefully shaping a public image polished to near perfection. They have mastered the craft of presenting tradition, unity, and an unbroken lineage, creating a vision of a monarchy untouched by scandal or weakness. From the grandeur of coronations to the sanctity of christenings, every public appearance, every speech, every carefully staged photograph has been meticulously planned to reinforce the illusion of a flawless dynasty. Yet behind the tightly guarded palace doors, beneath the layers of ceremony and pomp, there have always been whispers, murmurs of secrets too dangerous to tell private disagreements, simmering in silence, and personal struggles that threaten the seamless facade. Meghan, a woman who entered this royal world as a true outsider, married into the family with undeniable grace, striking style, and a clear vision for the role she wanted to carve out for herself. Yet very quickly she discovered that the world she had joined was one where truth was flexible, where honesty was often suppressed, and where silence was not optional but demanded at every turn. Imagine living every day under the crushing pressure of being unable to share the most fundamental truth about your own children. Every single word you speak is dissected. Every gesture you make is studied, and every small misstep is magnified by the relentless, all-powerful global media machine. For Meghan, this was no abstract idea, it was her lived reality. The anxiety, the fear, the deep sense of isolation, it was all multiplied by the knowledge that a single slip, one seemingly casual remark, could unleash a firestorm of speculation, outrage, and consequences beyond measure. And that is exactly what came to pass. In what appeared to be a harmless casual comment made during a private conversation, one that against all expectation somehow reached the ears of the public, Meghan directly referenced the surrogacy of Archie and Lilibet. It was never intended as a headline. It was not part of an interview orchestrated to shock or provoke the world. Yet the effect was immediate, seismic, and impossible to contain. Royal watchers, seasoned journalists, and the wider public all rushed to decode her words, to weigh their implications, and to understand what this revelation truly meant, not just for her children, but for the family and the monarchy itself. The magnitude of this disclosure cannot be overstated. Titles, succession rights, and the carefully cultivated optics of continuity within the royal institution all hang precariously in the balance. The monarchy, an institution that has endured for centuries, functions within a rigid framework of rules and traditions. These rules exist to preserve hierarchy, to safeguard privilege, and to project stability through ritual and order. To suggest that direct heirs to the royal line were not carried by the Duchess herself, but instead brought into the world through surrogacy, is to challenge those rules in ways almost unimaginable. It sparks questions of legality, of legitimacy, and of the very essence of royal inheritance itself. Yet beyond the legalistic and political weight of this revelation lies something far more personal, more deeply human. This is also the story of a mother caught in an impossible dilemma, struggling to balance crushing public expectations with the honesty of her personal truth, all while trying to shield her children from forces that no mother could ever fully control. Meghan's journey underscores the constant collision between individuality and tradition, between the desire for privacy and the demands of spectacle, between authenticity and the obligations imposed by an institution older than memory. She was forced into silence, compelled to play a role that clashed with her true identity, and to make choices that would be examined and judged by millions across the world. Now, consider the enormity of the stakes. A simple passing remark that all but confirmed the use of surrogacy has the power to ignite debate across nations, to reshape public perception, and even to influence how future generations may view the monarchy itself. Imagine standing in Meghan's place, aware that every word you utter carries immense weight, yet driven by the human need to acknowledge the truth, even if only subtly. That tension, that blend of fear and courage, all crystallised in the single moment when she let slip what had been buried for so long. This is not a tale of shallow royal gossip. It is a story about secrecy, about the dynamics of power, and about the emotional cost of living a life perpetually under the spotlight. It is about how institutions demand compliance and uniformity, often at the expense of individual truth. And above all, it is about how a single moment, a fleeting, unguarded statement, has the potential to shift the narrative forever. Yet, what Meghan revealed is merely the opening act. Behind her words lies a tangled web of implications, connections, and consequences that stretch far beyond the private sphere of family life. The monarchy is a finely tuned system where every action is watched, every rumour studied, and every precedent treated as a matter of weight. The confirmation of surrogacy does more than answer whispers. It challenges long-standing assumptions, injects uncertainty, and forces questions into the public arena that had until now been considered too dangerous to even voice. As we explore this story further, keep in mind what truly hangs in the balance: the future of the children, the hard-won reputation of the family, and the carefully polished image of a monarchy that has survived centuries by guarding its facade. Each revelation carries layers upon layers of meaning, and every detail matters. By the time this hour reaches its end, you will understand not only what Meghan said, but why it is significant, who stands affected by it, and how this could change forever the way the world views the royal family. And as the introduction reaches its close, consider this chilling thought: Meghan's accidental admission did more than simply uncover a secret. It ignited a chain reaction of events. And what unfolded next would transform everything, events so unexpected that not a single person saw them coming. Why had no one dared to speak of this until now? It is a question that has long echoed in whispers behind the towering palace walls, for decades left unspoken in public. But now, with Meghan's unintentional revelation, the question has struck the world like a thunderclap. The royal family has always been synonymous with secrecy. Every smile, every wave to the crowd, every carefully timed announcement has been orchestrated to deliver a picture of composure, of dignity, of flawless control. Yet behind the majestic facades of Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle lies a culture where silence is not merely valued, it is demanded. And certain truths, no matter how deeply personal or profoundly human, are considered too explosive to ever be released. From the very instant Meghan stepped into the royal spotlight, she entered a world ruled by hidden codes and rules invisible to the public eye. The monarchy thrives on tradition and the art of optics. Every decision, every birth, every marriage is filtered through the prism of legacy. This is a world where privacy is rare, where the press lies in wait for any stumble, and where control over the narrative functions as a weapon as sharp and unforgiving as any blade. But why, one might ask, would surrogacy, a medical process, an intensely personal decision, be considered a secret too dangerous to reveal? The answer lies at the intersection of power, perception, and the relentless gaze of public expectation. The monarchy is not merely a family. It is an institution that must uphold centuries of precedent and safeguard its own mythology. An heir must be legitimate, not only in bloodline, but also in the eyes of perception. The appearance of unbroken continuity, the belief that the blood of kings and queens flows in a straight, unbroken line, is essential to its survival in the public imagination. Any deviation from this carefully constructed image risks more than damaged reputations. It threatens the very stability of the institution itself. And when the subject is Meghan, an American woman who married into the historic House of Windsor, these rules became absolute and non-negotiable. She had to move through a labyrinth of invisible protocols, while existing under the constant scrutiny of the global press, all while safeguarding the most intimate truth of her life, her children. Imagine being told that you are not permitted to speak openly about how your own children came into the world. Imagine smiling for cameras, shaking hands, and presenting composure to millions, while harbouring a secret capable of igniting a storm. That was the reality Meghan Markle faced. For many long years, she found herself locked in a paradoxical position, a mother whose natural instinct was to fiercely protect her children, yet simultaneously bound and restrained by rules that elevated appearances and optics above honesty and authenticity. It was a suffocating tension, one so unique and heavy that only a handful of outsiders could ever even begin to grasp its true weight. And yet it is precisely this extraordinary pressure that makes her unintentional revelation not only compelling, but deeply shocking. The silence surrounding the subject of surrogacy within the royal context is far from new. Historically, the monarchy has treated all matters of health, medical issues, and personal struggles as closely guarded secrets. Illnesses were hidden. Pregnancies were shrouded in discretion, and even private disagreements were carefully buried, all to maintain the aura of strength, perfection, and invincibility. The public has long been conditioned to expect royals to appear flawless. But behind those velvet curtains and golden facades, the human reality has always been far more complicated and fragile. When Meghan, without calculation, referenced the surrogacy of Archie and Lilibet, she broke with a tradition that stretches back through generations, a tradition carefully built on silence, on discretion, and on iron-fisted control. Yet, one must ask, what is the cost of such silence? For Meghan, it was paid in the form of isolation, mounting emotional pressure, constant fear, and unrelenting anxiety. To live in a world where truth itself is treated as negotiable is to endure a kind of psychological strain that very few could withstand for long. She was not only trying to meet the crushing weight of public expectation, but she was also bound by the invisible but unyielding rules of an institution that places legacy and continuity far above individuality. The magnitude of this expectation is nearly impossible to imagine. Every conversation she engaged in, every decision she made, every sentence she spoke could be dissected, judged, and turned into a weapon against her. And yet, in spite of this suffocating reality, the deeply human impulse to be honest, to express one's authentic lived experience, remained alive within her. This is why her slip, her quiet and casual reference to surrogacy holds such extraordinary power. It is the human truth forcing its way through the iron walls of institutional control. Now consider the far-reaching consequences of breaking that silence. Within the royal world, even a single revelation can ripple outward across continents. The media magnifies it, social platforms erupt, and public opinion shifts in the blink of an eye. Secrets, once uncovered, spread with unstoppable force. The monarchy trained to react with swiftness and precision shifts immediately into damage control mode. But this time was different, because Meghan's revelation was not a planned announcement. There was no polished press release, no carefully orchestrated interview. It was an offhand moment, but one with an impact as seismic as an earthquake. It compelled the world to ask questions long considered unthinkable. Were Archie and Lilibet legally and biologically recognised as direct heirs in the traditional royal sense? How could the monarchy reconcile modern personal choices with centuries of rigid expectations? And perhaps most striking of all, what does this mean for Meghan herself? A woman whose very words and very voice have been policed, managed, and restrained by tradition since the moment she entered the institution. Let us pause and ask the audience directly, to what extent should tradition dictate the personal truths of an individual? At what point does secrecy become too heavy, too corrosive to bear? The tension here is undeniable, and it is this very tension that makes the story so captivating. Royals are, at the end of the day, human beings, yet their humanity is often stripped away, subordinated to symbolism. Meghan's life is a vivid embodiment of this struggle, an outsider navigating a labyrinth of rules that were never designed for her, but that were enforced upon her with relentless consistency. It is within this environment that her accidental admission transforms into far more than idle gossip. It becomes a prism through which we can examine the staggering human cost of institutional silence. Furthermore, secrecy around surrogacy is intimately tied to the perception of legitimacy and inheritance. The rights of succession, the favour of the public, and the fragile narrative of continuity all depend on how birth and parentage are perceived. By revealing the truth of surrogacy, however unintentionally, Meghan forced the monarchy to stare directly at an uncomfortable reality that the supposedly seamless image of direct unbroken lineage may not be as flawless as presented. And cracks in an institution that has stood for centuries are never trivial. They have the power to alter public trust, reshape media narratives, and even destabilise the internal dynamics of the royal family itself. This is why the monarchy clings so tightly to its secrets. Every whisper, every leak holds the potential to unravel decades of carefully constructed authority. The stakes here are not only institutional, but also deeply personal. For Meghan, it is the struggle of motherhood colliding with honesty. For the monarchy, it is the survival of legitimacy colliding with perception. It is the collision of these stakes that transforms this moment into a drama at once intimate and global. It is no wonder then that Meghan's slip has seized the fascination of millions. For this story is not solely about the method of conception, it is about power, control, and the universal struggle between personal truth and public expectation. And yet, despite the magnitude of potential fallout, Meghan's humanity shines unmistakably through. In that fleeting, accidental revelation, she displayed courage, whether instinctual or unintended. It was courage nonetheless. She voiced a truth buried under years of expectation protocol and silence. And by doing so, she reminded the entire world that even the most carefully managed narratives are fragile, vulnerable, and subject to collapse. The human heart, its fear, its love, its demand for honesty cannot be fully caged by tradition or by institution. As we begin to unravel this story further, remember this: the accidental leak is not the conclusion, but only the beginning. Behind Meghan's few words lies a vast and tangled web of history, of unyielding protocol, of legal dilemmas, and of profound emotional realities. It is a tale that challenges assumptions, sparks questions, and forces the world to reconsider how secrecy, power, and family operate within one of the most scrutinised institutions on earth. But what followed her words would take this already extraordinary moment and elevate it to something even more dramatic, something no one, not even those closest to her, could have foreseen. Now, picture this. Imagine being forbidden from telling the simple, undeniable truth about your own children. A thought so devastatingly simple and yet so harrowing it makes the mind reel. For Meghan Markle, this was not a theoretical idea. It was her lived daily reality. Under the endless surveillance of the royal machine, every smile she offered, every word she spoke, every gesture she made was recorded, measured and judged. And the cruelest reality of all knowing that the most intimate truth of her life, the story of how her children truly came into the world, was forbidden territory. She was silenced, she was barred from speaking. And yet it was a truth that could never be ignored. From the very moment she became part of the royal family, Meghan found herself under an intensity of attention unlike anything most people could ever imagine. On one side was her personal life, her deep love for her children, her natural instinct to speak with honesty, and her desire to live with transparency. On the other side stood a centuries-old institution steeped in layers of tradition, hierarchy, and rigid control. The monarchy possessed its own invisible set of rules, unyielding, unspoken, but absolute. These rules dictated exactly what could be said, when it could be said, and who was allowed to say it. Meghan was left to carefully tread this minefield while still fulfilling her public duties, maintaining appearances, and above all, protecting the people dearest to her heart. The psychological toll of such restriction cannot be exaggerated. Every mother instinctively wants to nurture, to protect and to explain the realities of her children's lives. Yet Meghan was constrained at every turn. She could smile, for the cameras celebrate her children's milestones in a controlled public way, pose for photographs polished to perfection, and deliver speeches on the grandest of platforms. But in those same moments, she was forbidden from speaking her full truth. That truth was stifled, silenced by centuries of expectation, by unyielding protocol, and by the invisible yet suffocating gaze of the monarchy. Now consider the isolation this must have created. Imagine having something so essential to your life, something that defines your very identity as a mother, yet being forced to constantly censor yourself, to filter every word, to exist within a kind of performative honesty. Meghan's reality was compounded by the global spotlight. Every word she uttered, every action she made was captured, replayed, analysed and dissected by millions. Social media amplified the criticism, rumours spread at lightning speed, and the press combed through every gesture for meaning. In such an environment, honesty itself became a risk. And yet, the natural human desire to be truthful never fully disappeared. It pushed back against the silence, refusing to be extinguished. Her struggle becomes especially visible when we consider the private moments of frustration that inevitably surfaced. In behind-the-scenes exchanges, in fleeting expressions, in off-the-cuff, remarks the weight she carried could be seen. Anxiety, self-doubt, and the constant fear of making a single misstep followed her like shadows. In interviews and in leaked recordings, subtle hints appeared, brief pauses, carefully chosen words, nervous inflections that betrayed the inner conflict raging beneath her composed exterior. Meghan was living in a paradox, torn between her maternal need to protect her family, her personal longing to speak honestly, and the suffocating expectations of an institution she had married into. This struggle was not merely emotional, it manifested physically. Those closest to her described long nights with little or no sleep, sudden waves of panic, and episodes of anxiety so severe they sometimes left her unable to move. The human body, under constant stress, reacts in ways that cannot be ignored. Racing heartbeats, tense muscles, spiralling thoughts. The cost of secrecy is not abstract, it is real, and Meghan bore it every day. Imagine, if you will, trying to navigate motherhood under these conditions. The instinct to care for your children, to shield them, with truth colliding constantly with the weight of forbidden knowledge. Every public appearance became a carefully orchestrated performance. Every smile measured, every handshake scrutinised, every expression judged. Meghan was forced to project calm confidence and composure, all while battling storms of unspoken truths within herself. The irony of this tension is striking. She was expected to embody the role of the elegant duchess, adored by millions, admired by the world, while her private reality diverged sharply from the polished image she was compelled to display. It is a contradiction that few human beings could withstand without breaking. And then, without warning, came the accidental slip, the moment that would change everything. In what seemed to be a casual remark, insignificant in the moment, Meghan referenced the surrogacy of Archie and Lilibet. The words were fleeting, nearly buried in conversation, but their meaning was monumental. In that instant, the truth long suppressed broke through the layers of silence and secrecy, exposing what had been so carefully hidden. It was proof of the impossibility of living indefinitely under enforced silence. The human need for honesty, for transparency, even within the most controlled of environments, cannot be silenced forever. What makes this revelation so compelling is its sheer humanity. It is not simply a headline splashed across tabloids. It is the story of a mother caught in impossible circumstances, torn between her instinct for honesty and her fear of devastating consequences. The accidental slip reveals her struggle, her courage, and her vulnerability all at once. She stands both human and royal, ordinary and extraordinary, a woman caught between the weight of personal truth and the crushing force of institutional expectation. Consider now the implications for Meghan herself. That accidental leak represented both liberation and fear. Liberation because the truth long caged had finally found air. Fear because the questions it raised were immediate and enormous. How would the monarchy respond? How would the press react? Would this moment define her identity in the eyes of the world? Or would it redefine the very institution itself? The emotional intensity of that instant is unmistakable. After living in silence for so long, one slip shifted the delicate balance between truth and expectation forever. So let us ask the audience, how far would you go to shield your family's privacy when faced with relentless global scrutiny? How much of your own identity would you suppress? And how much risk would you be willing to bear to let truth slip? Through Meghan's experience forces us to confront these uncomfortable questions, shining a light on the immense human cost of life lived under perpetual surveillance and unyielding institutional control. The stakes here extend beyond Meghan as an individual. Her children are at the very centre of this narrative. Every decision she makes, every word she utters, every secret she keeps casts ripples that touch Archie and Lilibet's lives. The battle between honesty and protection becomes even more urgent when viewed through the lens of parenthood. To protect them, Meghan must balance secrecy, manage public perception, and still hold on to her own need for authenticity. It is a nearly impossible act of balance, and the accidental revelation shows just how fragile that balance truly is. And yet, through the waves of pressure criticism and ceaseless scrutiny, Meghan's humanity shines undeniably bright. Her struggle, while extraordinary in context, is at its core universal. The need to be heard, the instinct to protect those we love, and the quest to live authentically even when circumstances conspire against us. What makes her struggle extraordinary is the scale, the monarchy, the global media, and the watchful gaze of millions. It is at this intersection of personal truth and institutional expectation that the tension becomes most dramatic, most compelling, and most profoundly human. As we move further into this story, the layers of contradiction, secrecy, and consequence only grow deeper and more entangled. Meghan's struggle to express herself truthfully sets the foundation for revelations yet to unfold. It is a clear reminder that even within the most rigidly controlled environments, human truth eventually finds a way to break through, sometimes quietly, sometimes explosively, and often at the most unexpected moments. What came next, however, propelled this struggle far beyond the realm of personal concern, thrusting it into the spotlight of global fascination. And no one, not the public, not the press, not even the palace itself, could have anticipated the firestorm that would follow. What if the truth emerged in a moment when no one was supposed to be listening? That question lingers like a shadow in the halls of every royal palace. In Meghan Markle's case, it became a startling reality. The accidental leak, a fleeting, unplanned slip of honesty, shattered years of silent secrecy and carefully guarded appearances. It unveiled a truth that the royal family had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal. And it did not come through an official statement, an exclusive interview, or a carefully timed announcement. Instead, it surfaced in a casual behind-the-scenes exchange, captured unintentionally and shared with the world. The response was immediate shock, fascination, and relentless scrutiny spread like wildfire across the globe. The very existence of this leak revealed something profound: how fragile the monarchy's control truly is. For decades, the royal institution has relied on precision, careful planning, and meticulous management of every narrative. Each public appearance has been staged down to the smallest detail, every speech meticulously vetted, and every gesture calculated to reinforce an image of stability, continuity, and dignity. And yet reality has a way of undermining even the most perfectly crafted systems. Meghan's words, unguarded and casual, tore through the veil of control, exposing a truth that had long been confined to whispers behind closed doors. Context here is everything. Reports suggest that Meghan made the remark in a private moment, perhaps in conversation with friends, staff members, or close colleagues, people she trusted. Believing herself safe within the boundaries of privacy, she referenced the surrogacy of Archie and Lilibet. Her words were not announced with fanfare, not broadcast to millions. They were quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible. And yet, in today's digital age, privacy is fleeting. Recording a transcript, even a short audio clip, can circle the globe in seconds, amplified by social media, news organisations, and gossip networks. What was meant to remain intimate became, in an instant, a matter of global attention. It is essential to understand why this seemingly small slip carried such monumental weight. Surrogacy, though increasingly common and widely accepted in many societies, remains a deeply sensitive matter in the world of monarchy. In this realm, succession titles and public perception are intimately tied to lineage and the biological parentage of heirs. By inadvertently confirming that neither Archie nor Lilibet had been carried by her Meghan, disrupted centuries of unspoken assumptions. She revealed the stark gap between the official narrative and the private reality. And in doing so, she forced not only the public, but also journalists, commentators, and royal insiders to confront questions that had been deliberately avoided for years. The emotional undercurrent of this moment runs profoundly deep. Like any mother, Meghan must have felt both relief and terror relief that her truth had been voiced, however briefly, and terror at the potential consequences. The human cost of secrecy, particularly about one's own children, is immense. To live with such a truth hidden away is to carry an unbearable psychological burden. Every word spoken becomes loaded with meaning. Every misstep threatens to spark a crisis. And yet, the innate need to express oneself is irrepressible. Meghan's slip represents this timeless human tension, the instinct for honesty overpowering the strict restraints of protocol. Experts and observers quickly seized on the moment, dissecting it with meticulous care. Audio analysts, journalists, and royal commentators studied the phrasing, the tone, and the timing. Was this truly accidental? Was it a deliberate choice disguised as a slip? Was it an unconscious plea for freedom from the suffocating constraints of royal life? Intent remains speculative, but one fact is undeniable. The effect was explosive. What had long been rumoured and speculated upon was suddenly confirmed. Archie and Lilibet were born via surrogacy, a truth the public had never been officially told. The reaction came like a tidal wave. Social media erupted instantly, with hashtags, memes, endless threads of debate. News outlets scrambled to provide explanation and context. Historians weighed in on precedent, while royal enthusiasts and critics alike pored over the implications. This one moment of candour became a lens through which the world examined not only Meghan's personal journey, but also the monarchy's obsession with image and the invisible but suffocating rules that govern its members. It was a rare and fleeting glimpse behind the curtain, revealing the machinery of control that so few outsiders ever truly see. Meanwhile, within palace walls, staff and advisers reportedly scrambled with urgency. Leaks, whether deliberate or accidental, are treated with utmost seriousness in the royal context. Information, after all, is power. And an unintended disclosure is a direct threat to the institution's control. Yet Meghan's words could not be taken back. Once released, truth has a life of its own. It spreads, reshapes perception, and alters the narrative. For a monarchy so accustomed to managing information with absolute authority, this was a reality they could no longer contain. The nuances of Meghan's remark are striking. She did not stand before microphones to declare surrogacy. She did not act as a whistleblower determined to expose secrets. She spoke almost in passing, with the ease and candour of someone who had borne the weight of silence for too long. And yet within that candour was a truth with consequences vast and global. It serves as a reminder of the extraordinary power of words, of the fragility of institutional control, and of the inevitability of truth breaking through even the strongest of facades. The irony of it all is striking. The monarchy, long celebrated for its skill in crisis management, now faced a crisis born not of scandalous intent, but of human error, an unguarded moment of honesty. And it is precisely these moments that captivate the public most. People are drawn to authenticity, to vulnerability, even when entangled with scandal. Meghan's words, spoken softly, now reverberated across the world, dominating headlines, talk shows, and conversations in every corner. What had been a private reflection transformed into a global narrative, proving that even institutions rooted in centuries of tradition cannot protect themselves fully from the unpredictability of the human element. Directly engaging with you, the audience. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where honesty, even accidental, shifted forever the way people perceived you? Can you imagine the crushing weight of having such a deeply personal truth subjected to examination, judgment, and scrutiny on a global scale? Meghan's slip compels us to reflect on the human cost of secrecy, on the battle between personal authenticity and institutional expectation. It underscores the extraordinary stakes at play, the shifting tides of public perception, the looming legal implications, and the weight of family legacy carried across generations. The leak itself sparks profound questions about timing and exposure. Why did it happen at that precise moment? What circumstances allowed those words to be overheard or captured? While the details remain cloaked in uncertainty, the effect is unmistakable. The revelation reshaped the entire conversation around the children's birth, their standing, and the broader balance of power within the family. It magnified Meghan's ongoing struggle, a woman forced to navigate the unrelenting tension between motherhood, personal truth, and the expectations of an institution that watches her every move. And then comes another crucial layer, the legal and cultural consequences. Surrogacy intersects with some of the most complex issues in royal life, inheritance, succession, and the legitimacy of titles. Meghan's unintentional disclosure did not simply add to gossip. It dragged these issues into the public arena, forcing them into debate. It challenged long-held assumptions, invited fresh scrutiny, and introduced uncertainty into norms that had been treated as unshakable. The implications rippled outward in every direction. Journalists, legal scholars, historians, and everyday citizens all added their interpretations, each one intensifying the pressure, heightening the scrutiny, and weaving greater complexity into the narrative. Yet, throughout it all, Meghan's humanity shines through. Within her slip, we see a mother seeking acknowledgement for her lived truth, a woman asserting her identity. Despite constraint, a person struggling to exist in an environment that demands performance at the expense of authenticity. It is a profoundly relatable struggle, though played out on an extraordinary stage, an intensely human story unfolding against the backdrop of pomp, ritual, and centuries of rigid tradition. But what followed raised the stakes higher still. The accidental leak grew beyond a moment of personal candour. It escalated into a global reckoning with tradition, with titles, and with the fragile optics upon which the monarchy has long relied, and not a single person saw it coming. She never needed to raise her voice. Her words alone carried more than enough weight. That simple reality captures the extraordinary significance of Meghan Markle's unguarded revelation. In one brief moment, she confirmed a truth that had been deliberately hidden. Archie and Lilibet were born through surrogacy. This was not packaged in a press release, nor unveiled in a polished, carefully orchestrated interview. It emerged quietly in a casual, behind-the-scenes conversation that nonetheless held the seismic power of revelation. And its implications are immense, legally, socially, and emotionally. To understand the gravity of this disclosure, one must break down the subtlety of Meghan's words. She did not stand up to announce the surrogacy as a bold declaration. Instead, she referenced it almost offhandedly, as if in passing a soft acknowledgement of a reality she had borne in silence for years. Yet, in the context of royal protocol, subtlety is everything. Every syllable, every pause, every seemingly minor phrase is dissected, analysed, and magnified by a worldwide audience. In this case, her subtle aside was understood as confirmation, leaving little room for doubt or denial. To fully grasp its magnitude, we must remember the framework in which the monarchy operates. For centuries, it has functioned on assumptions about lineage, legitimacy, and continuity. Heirs are expected to be born naturally within marriage, a principle that reinforces the unbroken bloodline on which dynastic continuity depends. By acknowledging that Archie and Lilibet were carried by surrogates, Meghan unintentionally shattered those assumptions. It was not merely a personal disclosure, it was a disruption of tradition that reverberated through the core of monarchy itself. Her phrasing is especially telling. Linguists and experts in public communication have studied the leaked snippets, noting the balance between casual tone and underlying gravity, between instinctive honesty and careful restraint. The way she spoke carried the weight of someone long burdened by secrecy. The delivery, so casual it seemed unintentional, only amplified the power of the truth revealed. It was the very tension between personal truth and public expectation that gave the moment its force. Now, pause and consider. Why would such a deeply personal truth be considered explosive in the royal context? The answer lies in tradition and in the perception of legitimacy. The monarchy depends on the appearance of stability, continuity, and unbroken lineage. A revelation that disrupts those perceptions does not merely harm image. It introduces uncertainty into centuries-old systems of inheritance and power. And while surrogacy is widely accepted in much of today's world within the monarchy's rigid framework, it becomes a matter of legitimacy, optics, and institutional survival. Here the human element shines most clearly. Meghan is before all else a mother determined to protect her children. Her accidental confirmation was not an act of rebellion or a carefully crafted statement. It was an instinctive human expression of truth breaking through imposed silence. She exists caught between dual roles, the public figure bound to protocol and the private mother yearning to protect. The slip embodies this collision of identities. The truth of her children's birth was never hers alone to carry, yet she bore it under unbearable weight, knowing that speaking it aloud could provoke a storm. Her words now extend into legal questions. Titles, succession rights, and inheritance laws have always been bound tightly to circumstances of birth. Archie and Lilibet's positions as heirs remain defined by law and recognition, but the conversation is now altered. Could conception methods influence eligibility? How might the sway of public opinion shape institutional decisions? These questions, once unspoken, now demand attention. The public reaction was swift and overwhelming. Social media erupted within minutes. News outlets scrambled to analyse the implications. Public opinion divided sharply. Fascination, sympathy, criticism, and outrage swirled together. The revelation did not merely revive gossip. It triggered debates about royal protocol, about secrecy, about the ethics of concealment, and about the unique pressures placed on mothers in the glare of the global stage. Meghan's words became a spark for international discourse, illuminating the fraught intersection of family tradition and power. There is an undeniable emotional resonance at the heart of this moment. Meghan's accidental confirmation reveals the immense psychological toll of living for years under enforced silence. She had been constrained, unable to voice a fundamental truth about her own children. That fleeting slip was not only a revelation to the world, but also a release for her, a rare instant where she could acknowledge her reality without mediation, without censorship. It stands as a profoundly humanising moment amid the grandeur of titles, crowns, and ceremonies, reminding us that beneath the layers of protocol and spectacle lies a person with emotions, instincts, and needs. The revelation also forces the monarchy itself into confrontation with an uncomfortable truth. The image, so carefully curated for generations, does not always align with lived reality. The institution depends as much on perception as on fact, and Meghan's words exposed a gap between the two. The question now shifts to how the monarchy will respond, how it can reconcile the personal choices of its members with centuries of law, custom, and expectation. Every gesture, every carefully worded statement, every official move will now be scrutinised, interpreted, and judged for meaning and consequence. Directly to you, the audience. How would you feel if your personal truth was deemed too controversial to share openly? How far would you go to protect your children within a system that places image above honesty? Meghan's experience sharpens these questions, laying bare the tension between authenticity and expectation, between the human need for truth and the institutional demand for silence. The subtlety of her words is crucial. She did not call for rebellion. She simply acknowledged a fact, and yet that fact carries ripple effects extending far beyond the personal. It challenges assumptions, sparks legal and ethical debates, and reshapes the public's understanding of monarchy itself. It also underscores something essential. No matter how powerful or controlled the institution, no narrative can remain airtight forever. Human truth will always find a way to emerge. What makes this moment especially compelling is the clash of stakes. Meghan's truth is deeply personal, emotional, and immediate. The monarchy's concern is structural, reputational, and enduring. When these spheres collide, the result is drama both intimate and global. a flashpoint where lived experience collides with ritual performance. Her accidental confirmation sits at that collision point. And yet the story does not end with her words. Even as they were spoken, the implications began to unfold. Media scrutiny intensified, legal scholars entered the debate, and public discussion escalated. That one slip of candour opened the door for questions long suppressed to surge forward. But what comes next raises the stakes even further. The potential legal ramifications, the debate over titles and succession, and the public discourse that could shape the monarchy's future, all ignited by one unguarded moment that no one anticipated. Could this mean Archie and Lilibet might lose the privileges tied to their royal birth? That question, previously whispered in private, now sits at the centre of global debate, thanks to Meghan's inadvertent revelation. For centuries, the monarchy has been sustained, not just by tradition, but also by a labyrinth of laws, protocols, and precedents. Every heir's legitimacy, every royal title, every place in succession has been defined with meticulous care, and deviations from precedent have long been treated as almost unthinkable. Yet with only a few words, Meghan Markle exposed a fissure within this system, compelling the institution to face questions it had long worked to suppress. To fully grasp the gravity, one must understand the mechanics of royal titles and succession. In Britain, titles are far more than honorifics. They carry legal status, privileges, and formal responsibilities. Succession is governed by centuries-old laws, including the Act of Settlement of 1701 and subsequent reforms. Historically, legitimacy and direct biological connection have been at the very centre of determining eligibility. Each heir must fulfil strict criteria in order to preserve continuity and to maintain public confidence in the crown. By referencing surrogacy, Meghan inadvertently challenged these assumptions. The ripple effects are profound. If Archie and Lilibet were not physically carried by Meghan, questions arise about the definition of lineage and inheritance within this unique framework. Legally, the children remain legitimate heirs, but optics are another matter. Tradition emphasises not only biological connection, but also the visible maternal bond that reinforces perception of continuity. Meghan's words disrupted this narrative, forcing insiders and the public alike to confront long-buried uncertainties. There is also a vital social dimension. Public perception holds immense power in shaping royal legitimacy. The monarchy survives not only through law, but through trust, fascination, and reverence. Any suggestion that succession might be influenced by methods seen as unconventional or concealed risks, undermining confidence. Meghan's accidental confirmation propelled these issues directly into the public spotlight, inviting debate the Crown would have preferred to avoid. For an institution where every nuance is scrutinised, this revelation offered an entirely new layer for discussion and judgment. The stakes are amplified further when one considers both legal and symbolic implications. Titles are not merely ceremonial labels, they embody responsibilities, traditions, and international recognition. For instance, the designation of prince or princess carries centuries of historical weight and cultural significance. If surrogacy were ever viewed as undermining direct maternal birth under certain interpretations of tradition, it could theoretically complicate the perception or even the assignment of such titles. While current law may not strip Archie or Lilibet of their positions, the debate alone introduces a dangerous ambiguity, creating uncertainty and raising precedent-setting questions for the monarchy's future. Imagine for a moment the atmosphere inside the royal household. Advisors, lawyers, and senior family members suddenly confronted a scenario that few had ever envisioned. Traditionally, leaks or revelations are handled with meticulous precision, carefully crafted statements designed to reassure the public, preserve stability, and maintain the monarchy's aura of authority. But this time was different. Meghan's disclosure was accidental, unplanned, and uncontainable. That loss of control forced the institution into an impossible balancing act, affirming the children's status without undermining credibility, responding to public curiosity without inflaming debate, and calming internal concerns, while still projecting the appearance of calm, unity, and strength. The emotional dimension of this cannot be overlooked. Meghan, as a mother, faced scrutiny not only as an individual, but also as someone responsible for the well-being of her children. Titles and succession rights are not abstract. They affect how Archie and Lilibet are seen, how they are treated, and how they will move through the world as they grow. They are still very young, yet their futures are already shaped by the weight of this revelation. For Meghan, that accidental confirmation was both cathartic and terrifying, a release of truth long held in silence, paired with the fear of consequences beyond her control. Public engagement exploded instantly. Social media flooded with speculation about how the monarchy might react. Headlines asked whether surrogacy could alter royal legitimacy. Debates arose about the meaning of biological versus legal parentage. Commentators, legal experts, and historians dissected every possible angle, analysing what this meant not only for Meghan's children, but for the monarchy as a whole. What began as an unguarded personal remark transformed into a global discussion with implications for inheritance, legitimacy, and institutional continuity. Looking back through history, the monarchy has weathered challenges to succession before. Wars, contested heirs, abdications, and political upheaval have all threatened its stability. Yet, each time, the institution adapted, reasserted its authority, and carried forward. Meghan's revelation represents a different kind of challenge. It is not born of politics or rebellion, but of modern medicine, changing social norms, and the inescapable transparency of the digital age. It is subtle, complex, and layered, forcing an ancient institution to confront realities it was never built to accommodate. So, let us ask directly, how would you react if a cherished tradition in your own family or community was suddenly challenged by new methods or truths? Would you cling to rules, protect appearances, or embrace human understanding? Meghan's in situation compels us to reflect on how institutions, royal or otherwise, adapt or fail to adapt when confronted with truths they did not expect. It also raises ethical questions. What duty does a parent have to protect their children in a system that prioritises protocol over honesty? And where does truth fit into that calculation? The tension is heightened by the global gaze. Unlike disputes within ordinary families, every decision of the monarchy is examined on a worldwide stage. Every statement is analysed, every clarification passed, every reaction dissected across cultures and nations. Meghan's words triggered a chain reaction of speculation that forced the monarchy into the uncomfortable position of responding to questions it had long avoided. The stakes are massive, not only public confidence, but legal precedent and historical continuity now hang in the balance. And yet, beneath the grand narrative lies the deeply human story. Meghan is above all else a mother who wanted to live honestly, but found herself trapped in a system designed to suppress truth. Archie and Lilibet, too, are at the very centre of this storm. Children far too young to understand, yet profoundly shaped by a revelation they did not cause. It is a tangled web of human emotion, institutional rigidity, and public obsession in which every spoken word, every perceived reaction carries enormous weight. But the real complexity has only just begun. Meghan's words opened a Pandora's box of debates about legitimacy, succession, and the place of personal truth within a centuries-old system. The monarchy, the media, and the public are all now entangled in questions that demand answers. And what comes next promises to be even more dramatic. Legal experts, historians, and royal insiders have already escalated the discussion from mere speculation to an urgent dilemma about lineage and legitimacy. The fallout is impossible to predict, but its consequences may echo for generations. She feared more than the press. She feared being silenced by the system itself. Those words capture the essence of Meghan Markle's lived reality within the monarchy. What haunted her was not simply the tabloid headlines, the viral hashtags, or the relentless paparazzi. It was the invisible machinery of the institution itself, unyielding, impersonal, and unforgiving. A system that demanded silence, conformity, and obedience, often at the expense of her most basic human instincts. Inside the palace walls, life was far from the fairy tale the world imagines. It was restrictive, suffocating, and merciless. Meghan's every move was watched. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, was dissected for signs of dissent or imperfection. And through it all, she was expected to raise her children with warmth and authenticity, to embody grace and composure, to perform the role of Duchess flawlessly. The pressure to maintain composure under such conditions was more than daunting. It was a matter of survival. In the royal world, failure to conform is never personal alone. It reverberates socially, politically, and historically. Meghan understood that each decision, each misstep, could be transformed into a statement. Every error could be amplified and weaponized. The stakes were monumental and the psychological burden unrelenting. It is little surprise that moments of isolation and despair became woven into her daily reality. That isolation was not singular, it was layered. There was physical isolation, rigid schedules, security protocols, and restricted access to the outside world. There was emotional isolation, the inability to voice her true thoughts, fears, or frustrations without risk of reprisal. And there was institutional isolation, the recognition that despite her title, she remained an outsider in a world governed by rules she did not create and could never fully master. These overlapping layers of restriction produced a profound loneliness, magnified further by the unblinking gaze of a world that judged her every move. Emotional intensity defined much of Meghan's private experience, shaping days and nights in ways that few could imagine. Those close to her described episodes of anxiety so extreme they manifested physically, sleepless nights that blurred into weary mornings, thoughts racing with relentless momentum, and stretches of immobilizing stress that left her drained and disoriented. There were moments when she could barely walk, not because of any visible injury, but because the crushing weight of expectation, the burden of guarded secrets, and the paralyzing fear of making a single wrong move pressed on her so heavily that even simple motion felt difficult. For any parent, such a state is almost impossible to conceive. For someone living under constant global scrutiny, it becomes nearly unbearable. Her fear extended far beyond herself. It reached forward into the future of her children, into their daily lives, and into the fragile balance she tried to maintain between honesty and protection. The paradox Meghan faced was stark and relentless. As a mother, her deepest instincts were to nurture, to protect, and to tell the truth to those she loved. As a member of a centuries-old institution, she was required to show restraint, to follow strict expectations, and to maintain silence on matters deemed sensitive. Those conflicting demands created a tension that never let up. Every choice required compromises between personal integrity and institutional obligation, between candid human truth and symbolic duty. It was a high-wire act without a safety net, a constant balancing that shaped nearly every hour of her life. The accidental leak confirming surrogacy revealed just how severe that tension had become. In that single unguarded moment, a deeply human need to speak the truth overcame years of enforced silence. It was not an act of calculated defiance. It was an instinctual, inevitable release of something she had carried for too long. By doing so, she exposed not only the reality surrounding her children's birth, but also the emotional and psychological cost of living inside a system that places image above individual truth. Consider the emotional stakes more fully. Meghan's experience shows a complex fusion of public pressure and private responsibility. On the one hand, she lived under the persistent weight of global expectation, with media attention and public opinion ever ready to judge. On the other, she carried the intimate responsibilities of motherhood, love, care, and ethical decisions about what is best for young children. Her story is a vivid example of how vulnerable institutions can demand behaviours that conflict with basic human needs, and how the cost of maintaining an appearance of perfection often falls as a heavy toll on the individual. Stress, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion became the hidden price of performing composure in public. The human contradiction is unmistakable. Meghan was simultaneously a world figure and a private woman, a caring mother and a public persona, a truth-teller and a rule-bound royal. She felt isolated even when surrounded by family, staff and advisors. Her fear was not for physical harm, but for eroding relationships, institutional reprisal, and the potential consequences for her children. Every decision carried risk, and every suppressed truth carried its own psychological price. This conflict, endured under relentless observation, would break many people. She continued to navigate it day by day. Directly to the audience, can you imagine living where honesty itself is dangerous, where a simple admission might create waves you cannot control? How do you reconcile personal integrity with crushing external expectation, particularly when those choices shape the lives of your children? Meghan's story forces these questions into stark relief, dramatised on a scale most people will thankfully never experience. This chapter also highlights a broader problem: institutional constraint. The monarchy is not designed for deviation, especially when it concerns lineage, family structure, or public image. Meghan's experience shows the damaging human effects of systems that prioritise perception over truth, how fear, isolation, and anxiety can become daily realities when institutions demand conformity above humanity. Her accidental disclosure acts as a crack in that carefully maintained edifice, a reminder that even the most tightly controlled environments cannot fully suppress the impulse to be honest. The consequences ripple outward beyond Meghan alone. Her children are now entwined in a narrative shaped by secrecy and revelation. Their public image, potential titles, and life experiences are all influenced by these disclosures. The leak placed them at the centre of debates they are far too young to understand, reshaping the context in which they will grow up in ways both intimate and institutionally significant. Each headline, each legal argument, and each social conversation becomes part of the world they inherit. And yet, amid the pressure, a thread of resilience appears. Meghan's experience reveals the complex interplay of fear, courage, and maternal instinct. She kept moving through an impossible environment, managing public expectation, navigating institutional constraints, and trying to honour personal truth. Her slip, the accidental confirmation of surrogacy, was both a moment of vulnerability and a testament to the persistence of honesty under pressure. It shows that even in the most controlled circumstances, the human impulse toward truth eventually finds a way to surface. But the full consequences are only beginning to emerge. With that accidental confirmation now public, the monarchy, legal scholars, and the wider public face questions that were once unthinkable. How will titles be assigned going forward? How will succession be interpreted in light of new realities? How will the institution reconcile long-standing tradition with the human realities that Meghan's words have made visible? The next section will examine the palace response, the rush to contain the story, the public reactions that followed, and the complex global conversation that unfolded and unravelling, so layered and unpredictable that no one could have foreseen its full impact. When the palace caught wind, it moved quickly. Those words sum up the frantic behind-the-scenes activity that followed the revelation. For generations, the monarchy has refined the craft of damage control, projecting calm and continuity even when crises threaten to destabilise its image. This episode was different. It struck at the core of lineage titles and the narrative the family had carefully maintained. The stakes were enormous, and the response had to be swift, exacting, and thoroughly calculated. The palace's immediate priority was containment. Advisors and officials convened at once, assessing the leak's scope and its likely effects. Every communication channel was monitored: social media trends, media coverage, and the quiet whispers circulating internally. The objective was simple in words, but complex in practice: control the narrative, reassure key stakeholders, and minimise perceptions of instability. In an age where information flows instantly across the globe and public opinion can pivot in moments, this task was extraordinarily difficult. Any hesitation or misstep could allow the story to spiral, amplifying consequences in ways that could be impossible to reverse. The methods of containment were layered and deliberate. Public statements were issued with carefully chosen words. Private briefings were delivered to key stakeholders, and every communication was designed to manage perception. Legal teams were tasked with reviewing possible implications. Historians were consulted to contextualise precedents, and PR specialists shaped narratives that might reassure the public without inflaming debate. Yet perhaps the most delicate challenge lay within the walls of the family itself. Advisors, senior officials, and relatives had to coordinate in real time, balancing discretion with urgency. A monarchy, forged over centuries, now found itself grappling with a distinctly modern crisis, one defined by social media virality, instantaneous global attention, and the clash between personal truth and institutional image. The palace's response was inherently reactive. Every royal appearance, every media engagement, every photograph released to the public was recalibrated to emphasise stability and normalcy. The sequencing of events, the smallest gestures, even facial expressions, became part of the strategy. Behind the scenes, staff worked under extraordinary pressure. They had to anticipate questions never before asked in public construct, answers that protected confidentiality and preserved the dignity of the crown, while contending with a narrative already reshaped by accidental truth. One of the most striking dimensions of this strategy was its dual emphasis on optics and legality. The monarchy could not simply deny or dismiss the revelation. To do so would appear disingenuous and invite further scrutiny. Instead, the palace took a nuanced approach, acknowledged the human dimension without confirming specifics. This required extraordinary finesse, because even a hint of insincerity or inconsistency could fuel critics and feed media speculation. The balance between limited transparency and strict secrecy was fragile, and the stakes could not have been higher. The emotional dimension inside the palace was equally intense. Meghan's disclosure reverberated not just institutionally, but personally. Relationships were strained, uncertainty seeped through official channels, and urgency dominated private conversations. Advisors long accustomed to managing scandals and crises now had to contend with raw emotions they could not control. Frustration, fear, and reputational anxiety were mingled with genuine concern for family well-being. Behind the ceremonial facade, the human tensions of kinship, duty, and survival played out in ways the public rarely sees. Meanwhile, the global reaction added overwhelming complexity. Media outlets seized on every syllable. Social media platforms erupted in real time, generating speculation, conspiracy theories, and polarised opinion. Headlines questioned the legality of succession, the meaning of legitimacy, and the role of surrogacy in a centuries-old dynasty. Commentators, experts, and historians contributed competing narratives, each interpretation amplifying the pressure. The monarchy's challenge was no longer confined to internal strategy. It was performing under the gaze of a world audience spread across continents, cultures, and time zones. Directly to you, the audience imagined being in Meghan's position, balancing personal truth, motherhood, and institutional duty while the world dissects your every move. How would you protect your children and your integrity in a system that prioritizes perception over honesty? Her experience forced us to confront these questions, illustrating the immense personal cost of living inside a highly controlled, high-stakes environment. The palace's approach revealed the tension between tradition and modernity. In past centuries, leaks and controversies were handled discreetly behind closed doors. But in the digital age, where private words can travel the globe in seconds, complete control is impossible. Meghan's accidental confirmation underscored this truth. A centuries-old institution struggling to adapt to a world where privacy no longer exists. The response demanded both the wisdom of tradition and the tools of modern media management, a balancing act as unprecedented as it was difficult. Within the family itself, reactions reportedly diverged. Some members prioritised institutional protection and damage control, emphasising credibility and public order. Others were more concerned with Meghan's personal well-being, the children's future, and the emotional toll of public speculation. These conflicting priorities layered complexity onto an already delicate response, revealing the constant balancing act between family loyalty, institutional responsibility, and public accountability. The fallout was inevitable. Despite the palace's efforts to manage perception, the revelation continued to spark debate, analysis, and speculation. Journalists pressed for details, commentators dissected the implications, and the public engaged in passionate global dialogue. Meghan's words had set in motion a chain reaction far beyond her intent, reshaping the conversation around monarchy, motherhood, and secrecy in profound ways. Yet the most compelling dimension remains the human story behind the crisis strategy. Meghan navigating isolation, anxiety, and maternal instinct became a catalyst for global discourse without ever intending to. The palace, bound by centuries of tradition and responsibility, responded with urgency and precision, and the public, eager for insight and drama, absorbed and dissected every development. But the consequences were far from finished. As the palace managed its crisis response and the world watched intently, new layers of complexity emerged. Media frenzy collided with legal implications. Emotional stakes deepened, and the monarchy's fragility became visible in ways rarely acknowledged before. What came next transformed the leak from a private moment of candour into a global media storm, the scale of which no one could have foreseen. Within mere hours, the world seemed to erupt. That is the simplest way to describe the reaction to Meghan Markle's accidental confirmation of surrogacy. Social media flared like wildfire. News organisations rushed to provide context and analysis. Journalists dissected every word, tone, and gesture. What had begun as an almost imperceptible private aside now ignited a global conversation with ramifications stretching across the monarchy, the children, and the institution itself. The speed of the reaction was nothing short of staggering. In the digital age, no secret stays hidden for long, and Meghan's revelation raced across platforms with lightning velocity. Clips of her words surfaced on YouTube within hours. Twitter threads dissected her tone and phrasing line by line. Instagram accounts speculated wildly about implications, pairing images with commentary that spread like wildfire. The immediacy of the digital spread heightened the stakes dramatically. Suddenly, every media outlet, influencer, and commentator had a story to tell. Some approached it with an eye toward empathy, others leaned into scandal, and still others pursued wild speculation. The world was watching, and in this case, Every second mattered. News coverage reflected this divide. Certain outlets focused on the profoundly human angle, emphasising Meghan's struggle, her fear, and the crushing psychological toll of living beneath constant scrutiny. Others concentrated on the institutional dimension, questioning what surrogacy meant for royal titles, for succession, and for the perception of legitimacy within an ancient system. Meanwhile, tabloids pushed the scandal narrative, plastering bold headlines across covers and packaging the story to maximise attention and clicks. And yet, despite these differences in framing one thread, united the coverage fascination. A global audience was entranced by the collision of personal truth, institutional secrecy, and unexpected disclosure. Social media, as always, magnified the intensity. Within hours, hashtags began trending worldwide. Fan forums erupted with debate, while countless memes sprang up, mixing humour, disbelief, and outrage. Millions engaged directly with the story, arguing, analysing, speculating in real time. The hunger for royal drama, authenticity, and intrigue fed into the accidental leak, creating a self-perpetuating loop of scrutiny. No detail was too minor to escape analysis. Every word Meghan spoke, every facial expression captured, every pause in her phrasing was dissected for hidden meaning. The digital audience, armed with reach and immediacy, became not passive observers, but active participants in shaping the narrative. The media frenzy also revealed cultural divides in interpretation. In some parts of the world, reporting leaned toward empathy, emphasising Meghan's humanity, her role as a mother, and the shifting norms around surrogacy. In others, the focus remained fixed on the monarchy itself, the risk to tradition, the fragility of succession optics, and the potential cracks in an institution centuries in the making. These differences enriched the global conversation, while simultaneously intensifying the pressure on the monarchy, which now faced the impossible task of crafting a response that would resonate across cultures and continents. The frenzy didn't stop with conventional outlets or social feeds. Late-night talk shows invited panels of experts to weigh in. Podcasts devoted entire episodes to dissecting Meghan's words and their implications. International forums debated the ethical responsibilities of public figures navigating secrecy in an age of transparency. The story had grown far beyond palace gossip. It had become a focal point for conversations about privacy, family, truth, and power under the spotlight of public life. For Meghan and her family, the storm was suffocating and unavoidable. Every headline, every analysis, every quip from a commentator added weight to an already heavy emotional burden. What was once a private truth had become spectacle magnified on a global scale. Yet, paradoxically, the storm also humanised her in ways the palace could not control. She was not portrayed only as a duchess wrapped in formality, but as a mother struggling with impossible choices, a figure both vulnerable and resilient. And, as the storm gathered strength, one question loomed above the noise. How would this reshape the monarchy? The immediate reaction had opened the floodgates for deeper scrutiny, for legal and cultural debates, even for the possibility of reform. But in the immediacy of the moment, only one fact was indisputable. Meghan's words had permanently shifted the narrative. They had forced an ancient institution to confront the unstoppable, unyielding power of modern transparency.